Mike Cruz here, founder and chief investment officer of Scale Investment Group, a boutique investment management firm in beautiful Southeast Michigan. I was at a get together with some friends recently, and I overheard a conversation that two of them were having regarding politics, and that eventually turned into a conversation of taxes. Now, these two individuals are on, let's say, opposite ends of the political spectrum, so there wasn't a whole lot of agreement with regard to what the optimal tax strategy should be, who should pay the taxes, primarily what tax rates should be, whether tariffs make sense, capital gains, property taxes, flat tax. We covered the entire gamut. I was obviously kind of listening with one ear towards the conversation because obviously it's a interest of mine. And while they didn't have a lot that they were in agreement on, there were two things that they did agree on. One, they both agreed that whatever taxes they were paying, they would prefer if the tax rates were lower. And I think you and I can probably agree with that as well. Regardless of one's tax situation, everybody thinks that they're paying more than their fair share, whatever that is. The second thing that they both agreed on was that the government would not stop at the current tax levels, that they would be happy to continue to increase them and increase them and increase them to the point where 100% of your taxes were being, or 100% of your wages were being collected for taxes. Now, at this point, I was happy to just continue listening, but upon hearing that, I had to butt in and say, actually, and I thought about explaining this verbally, but then I had an idea. So I grabbed a Sharpie and I ripped off the top of the pizza box and I drew what some of you may recognize as a Laffer curve. And I explained why increasing taxes doesn't necessarily generate more revenue for the government. Now, in this illustration here, between 0 and a lot, you have revenue on the horizontal axis, right? And on the vertical axis, you have the tax rate going from a minimum of 0 all the way up to 100%. You'll note that at both 0 and 100% tax rates, the amount of revenue that the government generates is nothing, right? 0 is pretty self-explanatory. If the tax rate is 0, you don't owe any taxes, you don't pay any taxes, and then the government has no money from which to operate. Open and shut, right? At a 100% tax rate, they also have 0 revenue because nobody in their right mind is going to work any amount for the benefit of the government and 0 benefit to themselves, right? That's called slavery or indentured servitude. And if you wanted to work for free, you don't even have to involve the government in those types of transactions. That's called volunteering at your local animal shelter or whatever the case is, right? So the idea behind the Laffer curve, and the Laffer curve is named after Art Laffer, an economist that was probably most famous, or is most famous, he's still alive, even though he's probably in his mid-80s at this point. He worked for the Reagan administration. He was largely responsible for the economic boom that we saw in the economy during the 80s. And the idea behind that is largely illustrated here, right? That you can actually increase government revenue here on the horizontal axis by decreasing the tax rate. So let's think about this logically, right? As you increase the tax rate and you get into this shaded area up here, you're going to get people that either retire or leave the workforce entirely because they don't want to, give whatever percentage to the government. It's just not worth it to them, right? They'd rather go to early retirement, spend that time with family or friends, do whatever the case, whatever they prefer, whatever the case is in their individual situation, right? Or they're going to engage in black market activity, so it's not taxable because it's officially off the books. They're going to unreport or underreport tips and other types of transactions that maybe are not easily trackable by the IRS. Now, the same is true in the opposite direction. As you lower the tax rate, you can actually increase revenue to the government. And remember, government economists are trying to get to this point right here. They're trying to maximize revenue to the government. And you can do that by lowering taxes because it does the exact opposite in many cases, right? People are encouraged to come back into the market because now they feel like they're being able to hold on to a much larger percentage or proportion of their earnings. They feel that it's more fair, so retirees sometimes come out of retirement. People that were not reporting or underreporting tips will suddenly start reporting more or all of their tips because now the threat from the IRS outweighs the potential benefit of the tax savings. You have people that were engaged in black market activities suddenly are going to be engaged in legitimate activities because, again, the juice is not worth the squeeze in regard to the tax fraud that they're committing there. And the idea behind the Laffer curve is, what they call supply side economics, or what detractors call trickle down economics, because they say that it benefits, the upper tier socioeconomic folks more so than the folks at the bottom. But really, paying less in taxes benefits everybody, and it's been shown to work, and conceptually, it makes a whole lot of sense. On a side note, I got to meet Art Laffer, the man behind the Laffer curve. Now, he didn't invent it, and he'd tell you as much, but it's named after him, and certainly something good to be associated with if you're him. Very personable individual, very funny, charismatic, not things that you typically associate with an economist or somebody that works in finance. Present company, of course, excluded, yourself as well, because you're obviously a individual of high moral character, humor, and intelligence listening to this episode here. If you're interested in learning more about him, his view of supply side economics, Hillsdale College, Hillsdale also a school here in Michigan, they have an excellent online free series of classes. I think it's 6 or 8 classes. Each one's between something like 25 to 35 minutes long. And they kind of have different topics in small digestible chunks with a little quiz afterwards. Absolutely free. Go to Hillsdale.edu, poke around on their website. You have to sign up, so they get your email address. But you get access to a couple of hours of a free and really interesting economic lectures or information. It's even if you feel like you've got a pretty good handle on economics, it's good to have a refresher occasionally. And if it's new to you, you're probably going to get quite a bit out of it, and it's going to make you just better at understanding how markets, how money, how all of that kind of stuff works and interacts with itself. So again, it was my pleasure to bring those two friends from different political persuasions kind of together and understand that, well, not necessarily is the optimal tax rate 100%. In fact, it's a suboptimal tax rate if what you're trying to do is actually maximize revenue to the government. So that was a fun little exercise, and it's always a good time when you get to draw on the back of a greasy pizza box. If you've got any questions, comments, or concerns, leave them below. I'll leave a link to Hillsdale College in the description here as well. If you've got any questions specifically for me, my email and contact information will be in the description box. And if you like this kind of content, give me a thumbs up, maybe subscribe to the channel. It lets me know that people are getting something out of it, and it keeps me encouraged to continue making these types of videos going forward. Till next time.